book of Genesis, and we've gotten to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is it's a long genealogy. So it was kind of funny. MacArthur, when he was getting ready to do it, he said, all right, we're going to set a record tonight, 28 verses or whatever. He's notorious for going very slow through the scriptures, and he knocked out a whole chapter in one night. So we're going to do the same in terms of we're going to cover the whole chapter. We'll probably reference back to it in some weeks to come as we look at some other genealogies as well. But before we jump into this one, I wanted to remind you of something from last time, and then we'll read through this together. But the question last time was, what is the significance of the third son of Adam and Eve? What's the significance of him being named Seth? And this idea of names having a meaning, we're going to see that play in a little bit more this morning. Seth means substituted or compensation or appointed. Let me just stop and maybe address that. When we have these meanings of names, they're not like this is exactly what it means. It's more of they associate with something. So you can use the word appointed there, and that's appropriate. You could also say it means substituted, and that would be appropriate. So I'm going to show you something a little bit that has some meanings of names that kind of play out in a certain way, which I think is interesting, but we don't want to overdo that because they don't have an exact correlation meaning, and I'll point that out when we get to it. But his name does have meaning. All of these names have meanings, and Adam and Eve hoped that Seth was the one that would continue the godly line that would bring about the one who would bruise the head of the serpent. So they thought maybe it would have been Abel, because Abel was righteous and was giving a good offering. Cain kills Abel, disqualifying himself and eliminating his brother. So now they're hopeful that Seth will be that one that's the promised one, or that will lead to the promised one. And ultimately they were right. Jesus does come through the line of Seth. So that's kind of the setup, and then we're going to read through about 4 screens, and there's some tricky names, so who would like to take a stab here?
And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth, for she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. And at that time people began to call upon the name of the Lord. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created. And when Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he had fathered Enosh 807 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he had fathered Kenan 815 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Thank you. So that takes us to the end of the chapter. So the first question, that's kind of, to me, seems somewhat of an obvious thing. What in the world can you learn, from a genealogy, right? It's like, why is that there? There's a lot of genealogies in the scriptures. What would be the point and things like that? So we'll get into some more of that, but if you have a thought, go
You
ahead.
touched on it last Sunday about how in a short span of time, if you live long enough, with a small amount of people in a long expanse of time, you could really fill up the earth.
Oh yeah. They estimate by the time of the flood, and we'll get into it maybe more some detail when we look at the flood, but they think population of the world could have been in the 7 to 8 billion, if I remember right, range. And it's just, you're living 800-900 years and having kids, and so and people aren't dying, so they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger numbers. Again, we don't believe in evolution. I think most people in the room would say, no, I don't believe that. And yet, we buy into some of their concepts without really giving thought to it. We think of man starting very primitively and kind of gradually working their way up. And that's not what you see in the scriptures. You see man starting at the apex and devolving downward. Now, one of the reasons we talk, say about the Bronze Age and how, now they can make bronze weapons, is because that's after the flood. So maybe from the flood back up, right? They were peak and they were kind of going downhill. The flood occurs, wipes literally everything out, and they start over with 8 people and no civilization. And then they've got to rebuild back up, and they rediscover all these things that were lost at the flood. So then there's a second Bronze Age, because prior to the flood, we looked last time at one of the sons of Cain, or grandsons, or great-grandsons, was the one that worked with metal, and another one was music. And so all of that was invented long before the flood, and then they kind of started over after the flood. And that's the history we know.
Cain and Abel were when the murder happened?
Yeah, that came up, and one of the things I was looking at, and obviously we have no idea, but the third son, Adam's 130 years old. Now we also know he had other sons and daughters, so we don't know if it's the third son or the 30th son. Do you know what I'm saying? It just seems, and this is the other thing I'm going to talk about, but we know, Lamech had Noah in 100, year whatever it was of his life. What we're not told is that this is the first son. That's often the way genealogies work, and you might assume that, and a lot of the people I was looking at have kind of assumed that, but I don't know that we necessarily can assume that. He might have been the 5th son. All of these guys might be just somewhere in their lineage, but it's the one we're tracking because it's the one that leads to the nation of Israel and Jesus, and so all the rest of them aren't that relevant, so they're not talking about the other sons and daughters that they, it's not relevant. So we're focusing on this one line, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the firstborn that we're tracking. So anyway.
Yeah, but later on in the Old Testament, doesn't the first son usually get the blessing?
Yeah,
And I think that's where that teaching comes from.
right, yeah. And maybe that would, but yet, at the nation of Israel, historically, it's
Right.
not the firstborn, it's, God keeps kind of adjusting that and kind of always going to the unexpected one was the one that got the blessing, like,
Also, in mine, I highlighted the last line of verse 1 and verse 3, where he's made him in the likeness of God.
Yeah.
Verse 3,
yeah,
in his own likeness after his image.
yeah,
And I was at Cornerstone University with Transport for Christ with a
Yeah.
booth set up, and we were sitting there having lunch, and these two guys come over and sit down and found out they were psychology professors.
Yeah.
And I asked him I says, are we all made in the image of God? He said, oh, yeah. Really excited about it, going to get to talking about it.
Yeah.
And I don't normally talk to psychologists.
Right. Right.
And so I asked him, I said, well, if we are, I says, how come in the genealogy it says that he makes him in his own likeness after his image? I said, what's the difference between that and the way God created Adam? And they looked at each other, wow, I don't know. I said, well, chapter 3 said that they fell from sin, in between. So we've inherited their sin nature. So we're not in a complete image of God because
Right.
we're sinful.
right. So
Wow, I never thought of that, they said.
Yeah. So we're in the image of God, and then ever since Adam, now we're in the image of Adam, because it says
Right.
that there in verse 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me give you one more question. And these are just let's think about this as we're going through. We'll kind of give an answer pretty late in this, but who lives the longest recorded life, and why is that significant? And everybody.
That was gonna be my question.
Oh, well, don't cheat and then look at the chart. But half of you probably already know the answer, but so we'll see how that plays itself out. Okay, so this is the book of the generations of Adam. So the book we're reading is Genesis, right? That's written by Moses, but this sort of maybe indicates that there had been some sort of a recorded record to keep track of these things, and that was maybe given to Moses at some point, and he's recording that. I'm not sure exactly why it says this is a book. And it's not a book like you and I think bound on the back. Could have been a scroll. A lot of times the scrolls are referred to as books in the Bible. We don't really know. But it is nonetheless a recorded generations of Adam. That's what we're looking at. So when God created mankind, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when he created them. So it's not he created them and named them man as in, because Adam means man. And so there's another one, I think it's Enosh, means mortal or something, mortal man, that kind of thing. But what he's saying here is he made mankind. And mankind, the human race, he refers to as man. And they were made both male and female, and both are made in the image of God. So it's not talking about the physical appearance, it's talking about, emotion, cognitive abilities, planning, all those types of things that make us different than animals. Go ahead.
It says he created them, male and female, and then blessed them,
Yeah.
plural,
Mm-hmm.
and then named them, plural, man, singular.
Right. Well, yeah. And my point is, it's not man as in a man. That's why I'm saying I think it's probably better to say or think of it like as in he named them mankind, or he
Bible
named
says
them
human.
Yeah, human. There you go. Is another way of saying that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Adam called her woman.
Right. Yeah. And called her Eve because she was the mother of everything. Yeah. And called woman because she was taken out of man. So when Adam had lived 130 years, so we know that Seth is born in the 130th year of Adam's life. We're not really told when Abel or Cain were born, or Cain or Abel were born. And we also know, if we keep reading, he has other sons and daughters, but we don't know, what the sequencing of all that. Again, Seth might be the 30th or the 300th, or, we don't know. It's the third recorded son. But again, Cain has a wife would be a sister. So somewhere along in there, there's some sisters born, and so, yeah. So he had lived 130 years, and he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image. So again, this is where we get the idea of original sin. The sin nature is passed on from Adam and Eve to all of their descendants. And this is significant. It's passed on through the bloodline, which is why Jesus could be born of a woman, but he couldn't be born of a man. What I mean by that is if you have a man and a woman come together, you're passing along the bloodline of Adam. He's human, so therefore he's born of a woman, but he's virgin born, being the Son of God, therefore he doesn't bring the sin nature of Adam with him. That's what is significant about the virgin birth, is yes, he's fully human, he's born of a woman, but he's not born with the assistance of a man, because that would make him fully human in the sense that he would have sin nature. And so he is divinely created through the Spirit coming upon Eve. And so that's part of what this is saying, is he has a son in his own likeness, sinful in his likeness as a sinful being. That's what's being talked about there. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years. So again, we get to then the total number. He fathered other sons and daughters. And his total lineage here, let me see if there it is, 130 years. Let me show you, now I got the chart. And I realized after I printed it, some of these lines on your screen are not visible, like the light tan. If you got a black and white, like right below Noah, I think it is, it's like you can't see it. It's just a white space. So maybe take your pen and kind of draw it on there.
And Methuselah, you can't either, so.
Yeah, you can't really see some of them because they're in grayscale and so I didn't want to print 30 copies in color and blow up the church's budget. So anyway, there's this thing I've got, and you can take a picture of it after class if you'd like. That's a little better. So there is Adam, and his son is born at 130. So this is how the columns work. Seth is born the age of the earth at the birth of this person, Seth, 130. And we get that from the father, right? So Adam's age is listed below. Now each time from there on, you're going to take the age and then add the next one's age. So 130 plus however old he was when he had his son would be this number. So he must have been 105. You know what I mean? So you'll see that kind of work itself out. The age of the earth at death. So for Adam, he lived 930 years. He was there on day 6, and he died, and therefore the earth is 930 years old. So that's that fourth column to the right there. Okay? So you've got 130 years plus 800 years after that, or a total of 930. So that's how your columns are set up there. I just thought it'd help explain that a bit. All right, so back to the days of Adam after fathering Seth were 800, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. And so then again, I got you back onto here. Total years lived, that would be the far left column there. That's their age. So you can kind of just walk down through there and answer that one question of who's the oldest one. It's, well, whoever's got the biggest number there, that's the oldest person there. All right, so that's how the columns work on that chart. And then notice it's 930 and he died. And that is this incredibly consistent pattern all the way through. This, what you just saw, he lived this many years, had a son, his name was this. He then lived another X number of years, had other sons and daughters. His total years were this, and he died. And that repeats itself 8 times in this sequence, because there's 10 people we look at, if my memory is right. So When Seth had lived 105 years. So that was the 130 plus 105 gives you 235 years is the age of the earth when Seth's son Enosh is born. It should say 235 there on that chart if you look at that. All right. So when Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived another 807 years. He had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. So there's your 912. And then I'm just showing you how I'm adding that up. So there's the 130 plus the, I'm not sure why I've got the 8. Oh, I'm going to show you the age of the earth. So you have he was born at 130. He lived 912. The age of the earth is 1,042 years. So he dies in the 1,042nd year since creation. Kind of gives you an idea how to kind of keep track of that. It'll come into a little bit more play as we go on. I'm just trying to help you see how the chart might work for you. All right. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years, had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. We'll go through this section fairly quickly. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he'd fathered Methuselah, or however you pronounce that. Mahalalel, that's it. That's right, sorry. Mahalalel. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Kenan were 910, and he died.
I'm not seeing well, okay, yeah, sorry.
That's all right. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he was a youngster. Whippersnapper. He's like the youngest father listed there. And again, it doesn't make sense to me that some of these guys were waiting that long to have kids, but maybe they did. I don't know. Noah had 3 sons and he had them at 500. So maybe that is what it's showing. I don't know. We're just not told specifically. We know they have other sons and daughters. I just don't want us to make the leap that these are firstborn, because we don't know for certain that that's what that is. I don't think we're told that anywhere. I couldn't find it. But a lot of people that I was listening to were referencing it that way. And maybe, I know they're smarter than I am, so maybe that is their firstborn. I don't know.
If you're going to live 830 years, you might wait till you're 65 or 115.
Yeah,
maybe.
that's true. Let's have our honeymoon period last a little longer, and then we'll have kids. I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, I have a question. I'm assuming when you say years, it's our years,
Yeah.
365 days.
Yep. Yes.
Because of the rotation of the earth,
Yep,
what's
yep.
there.
There's a weird thing. We may try to look at that as we go toward the flood, but there's in the Bible, it uses 360 days as a year for like prophetic years. And I've never figured out why it does that. I know it does. I don't remember now why. So, and there was you may remember this. I think it's in the time of Joshua. The earth stands still, the sun and the sky stand still. And there's a recorded history of that in other parts of the world. And the thinking is that it potentially is that Mars, the planet Mars, came close enough to the earth in a near orbit that it sort of altered the tilt or axis or spin or something. And so I haven't done a lot of study on that, but that's something I remember hearing about at one point. And that's why now things are slightly different than they would have been prior to that. So if I have a chance when we get into the flood, maybe I'll do some more research on that and explain it a little further. So are they years though? Yes, they're years. They're just regular years. They may be off by a couple of days because of something like that I'm not aware of. But they're not, this is really in cat lives or dog years or no. This is just regular years. It's normal stuff. All right. Did I read this one? I think I did. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 and had other sons and daughters. All the days of Mahalalel were 895, and he died. And when Jared had lived 162 years, he'd fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the years of Jared were 962. So almost a winner. And the longest, he was just a little shy. Interesting. After he fathers Enoch, he lives 800 years. So see what happens next here. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah.
That's about the youngest father, right?
Yeah, one of them. There was one other at 65. Enoch walked with God after he followed Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. So I've got a question on there for you. What does it mean with Enoch walked with God? Because it doesn't say that about everybody else. It just says they lived X number of years. It doesn't say that about him. Notice that. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch. And this one, Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah. So it's very different. It's 300 years. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years, shorter of the lifespans. And again, his dad lived 800 years. This guy only lived 300 after he fathered Methuselah. So his dad outlived him by 500 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but his son made up for it.
Yeah. Enoch walked with God. It says it again. In other words, the second time it's saying this again. So let's look at a couple of things we see about Enoch that we're not told here, that maybe helps fill this in a little bit. This is in Jude. And it's interesting because what we saw there in Genesis, that's really what we know until we get to New Testament. We're not given a whole long story about Enoch, okay? So Jude tells us something we have no way of knowing other than by reading Jude. Kind of interesting. This is God-given information to Jude, you know. Now, granted, it may have been orally tradition passed on that Enoch had said this, that Enoch had said this, but the only way we know it is because God had it recorded here in the book of Jude. It was about these. These is referring to false teachers, people that were worshiping God in the wrong way. They were doing it their way rather than God's way. That's who the book of Enoch, or the book of Jude talks about. It was also these that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, and if you look at your chart, that's correct, he's the seventh generation, prophesied saying. So Enoch is a prophet, and he prophesies this back during his day. Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment on all and to convict all the ungodly for all their deeds of ungodliness that they have committed in such an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things that ungodly sinners have spoken against him. So this is stated during the time frame that we're looking at. This isn't, this is prophetic actually about the very end of the age when Christ comes back with the angels in flaming judgment. It's talked about in Thessalonians. And but the seventh from Adam is the one that is telling them that's what's going to happen. He's sort of a preacher of righteousness in the midst of this generation of folks, that he kind of stands out as the only one that was walking with God. It doesn't mean he is the only one, but it does mean that he may have been the one that was really noticeable about him. He was very unique in his day for being one that would actually walk with God.
Would some people try to teach that as he's prophesying the flood instead of the end times?
I don't think so. Because, well, some people may. Here's the thing, when these guys would do prophecy, they didn't understand what the meaning was, right? I know Daniel's like, what's going on? And God tells him, this is not for you to understand. Don't worry about it. Those who are going to have it happen to them, this will mean something to them, not to you. Just write it down. Leave it there. It'll be all right.
I guess my thought is that some of the churches that are trying to say the revelation is not not
Yeah.
essential to be taught.
Right.
Would say that replies to the flood.
Yeah,
Or
I would say,
applies to the flood,
yeah. The reason I would think that it doesn't is because Jude is speaking of it as a,
As a total erase.
well, that, and I would say he's speaking of this maybe as a future thing. But the other thing is it's flaming, I'm trying to find it in here, 1,001 executing judgment. With 10,000 of his holy ones executing judgment.
Okay, yeah, it would be the end times instead of the flood, right?
Yeah. I think it is yeah. Anyway, all right, let's move it. I think the flaming, it's not in that passage. I don't see it there now that I've reread it. I'm pulling that from Thessalonians because that's where it talks about Jesus coming with his holy ones in flaming vengeance. And so I'm reading that into that. Sorry. Okay. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. It's the only one that doesn't say, and he died. And so then it's like, okay, I don't know, what does this mean? Does this mean he just like disappeared, or what's going on there? Why doesn't it reference him dying? And so this is a little bit of a mystery, because all the others lived X number of years and he died. It's 912 years and he died, 905 years and he died, and then you get to him and it doesn't say that. Here's some more. This doesn't say he died, it says he took him, for God took him. Okay, so if we go to Hebrews, I'm going to read this whole thing because I think it's helpful to see it in context. So it goes back, starts with Abel in this section. By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, though he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gift. And through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. So his action of faith is speaking to us today, meaning we should do like Abel is what he's saying there. But then it moves to Enoch, kind of a separate thing. There's a whole list of these guys in chapter 11. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he would not see death. So now we know for sure that is what happened. He was just raptured out, that kind of thing. Same as Elijah. Elijah was taken in a fiery chariot with angels that came and swooped him up and off into heaven. We don't know how this happened, but he didn't see death. And he was not found. The reason they couldn't find him, because God had taken him. So it's very explicit here in Hebrews that is actually what happened to him. He was taken to heaven by God without dying. When we went through Revelation, there's 2 witnesses, and there's a lot of speculation as to who those men are. And I had said at the time, maybe it's Enoch and Elijah, since everybody dies and they didn't. Maybe they're coming back a second time so they can, die. I'm not staking a claim on that. I just thought that was an interesting observation. So let's start with the end of the highlighted part here. Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. So that's a clue as to this walking with God. And then it says this, and without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So the reward of seeking him is being said to have walked with God. Enoch believed that, had the faith that if I seek God, he will reward that seeking him, and I will walk with God, and that was pleasing to him. For before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. And then it's just a great reminder for us. Can we walk with God? Yes. Will we be given prophecies to share? I doubt that. I don't think that's going to happen. But that nonetheless, we can still walk with God. And in the same way, believing that he rewards those that seek him, and we seek him in faith that he will then show himself to us. Blessed are the pure in spirit, for they shall see God. I think there's kind of a couple of meanings to that. One is those with a pure heart could be describing those who are saved. They will ultimately in the end see God. But I think how it references here is Enoch with pure motive seeks God and finds him, so to speak. So if we are not trying to prove a point, but we're trying to, God, I want to know you, and you're seeking him, you will find him. He will be found by those who seek him. You will see him in a way that others don't. I'm reminded of a book called Knowing God by J.I. Packer. And it starts with a story of a man who was teaching at some theological college in England and had taken a stand on God's sovereignty in saving those that he has chosen. And it kind of destroyed his career. He was blackballed, and so J.I. Packer and him are walking one day and talking, and the man says, well, I mean, it's ended my career, I'll never be able to advance, but it's okay because I've known God. He had come to know God in a way that, was totally unique because he was willing to sacrifice his career in a pursuit of knowing God. So that is something we can do now if we pursue him in that way. So here's the answer I have for that question. This is speaking of Enoch living a life of faith in stark contrast to his contemporaries. I think that's something we can see. Everybody else has said that they lived and they died, they lived and they died, they lived and they died, but he is said to have walked with God, and that is very distinct from his contemporaries. It's a close, intimate relationship with God, and because of the book of Jude, we know that God had revealed to him his plan to come to the earth and bring fiery judgment on the ungodly. So we know that God had revealed that to Enoch. One of their evening strolls. Someday I'm going to come, and we don't know exactly how that looked, but we know that's part of what happened there. I know there's none of you can't write that fast, so that's why I give you the answers on the back of the sheet if you have to look at that for completing that. So when Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah are 969 years, and he died. Like ding, 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 he won. He wins the prize. He's the oldest.
Really?
Yeah, he's the oldest.
Well, I mean, if you were in jeopardy and that was a question, the answer would be who is Methuselah, for sure.
Right.
But I just picked up on that. He's the one that's recorded, but there was all these other people.
Sure.
There could possibly be somebody not recorded that lived longer.
Yeah. The recorded, I think that's how I asked the question. What's the longest recorded life? Yeah. We don't know, but yeah, this is the longest recorded one. So why is that relevant? That'll be the next part of that question. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son. It doesn't say that in the rest. Now, obviously they are sons, we're told that, but this one it specifically says he fathered a son, and called his name Noah. And then you see something like they called him Seth, and then they explain because he's been appointed as the replacement of Abel, right? So Seth is appointed. Noah calls his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief, or comfort would be a word there, from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. So Lamech calls him Noah, which is because he sees him going to be bringing relief or comfort. So that we start to get a meaning of a name there for Noah in that way. Let me show you the rest of this here. Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years, and he had other sons and daughters, and thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. I think there has to be some significance to that, but I don't know what it is. 777 years. I mean, there's, it's like the divine version of 666, or something. I don't know what to do with that. I'm gonna
7, the number of completeness.
Yeah, perfection and completeness, and so we see it all through Revelation. 7 of this, 7 of this, 7 of this, and so this guy is 777 years old, and I'd love to figure that out someday. Why is that relevant?
You can't tell on the chart, our chart, maybe
Yeah.
you can on yours.
You'll see
It
it.
never hit me. Noah had family that died in the flood.
We'll see that. I mean, yes, you will see it on the screen. Okay. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It's interesting. I don't know if they're triplets. We're not told it. What this order was that they were born, or so I don't know. And it doesn't say in the 500th year. It just says after he was 500 years old, he had these 3 sons. So did he have all 3 in the 500th year? Not really sure. So here's another question, and we're going to answer a couple of them here all simultaneously. How old was the earth at the time of the flood? And that'll be relevant as we try to answer this other question. So now to the chart. So Noah is born in year 1056, according to the adding up of the ages of the fathers at birth of their children. It's 1056 is the age of Noah, or the age of the earth at his birth, okay? Now on this line here, all the way over, 1056 is when Noah's born, plus he's 600 years old at the time of the flood. I pulled that from another verse, but I don't think I have it in here. The flood came in the 600th year of Noah's life. So you add 600 to that, and you get 1656. From creation to Noah is 1656.
And Lamech died 9 years before, right? Or no?
Yeah, looks like it. Can I do that? Hey, looky there. I didn't know I could do that. All right. So here's Methuselah, 1656, and the dad dies just
Shortly before.
5 years younger, 5 years earlier. So he died 5 years prior to the flood. That would be interesting if it were the same year.
The age of the earth there on Enoch. Would the earth have been only 987 years close by you there?
Yeah, yeah,
987 years?
yep, and then,
Because it was 1422 before.
I think maybe that one's wrong. I got added, something got screwed up on that one,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Not sure what's happening there. No, sorry.
Well, but if they,
Enoch died before Jared.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
he
because
did
Enoch was
love-
taken,
he
he
did love-
didn't
Yes.
live long, right?
So
Right.
that would be correct, probably, okay.
Oh, that may be, because the age
Yeah.
of the earth at his
Yeah.
death, right, not his
Right,
birth,
at
sorry.
his death.
Yes,
Okay,
at his death. He
sorry.
died quite a bit younger, than the rest. So what is this line? I haven't talked about it. It's when Adam died,
Okay.
which is like, no, wait a minute, what? So Adam's alive through all of these other lives? Yeah, let me zoom back out a bit. Noah is born here. He almost met Adam. I mean, that's not, right? His dad would have could potentially have met Adam. What's interesting is from Adam to Noah, you've got 3 people. You know what I mean? Methuselah knows Adam, Noah knows Methuselah. That's like, my friend's friend. It's not like 10 generations the way we think of it. If I were a friend of mine was a good friend of Abraham Lincoln, I would know things about Abraham Lincoln that nobody knows, right? Because I'm only one removed. That's the thing that's interesting here is Adam can know all. No, we don't know who they knew, and because the world may be getting kind of spread out a little bit. But the point is, there could very easily be a connection there. And these guys are on the planet for, hundreds of years together. So it's just an interesting thing to notice.
It'd be like grandfather, great grandfather, how made down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's-
great-great-great-grandfather's still living.
Yeah, he's still living. Noah's dad could have met.
Well, we're assuming that they lived near each other, but
Yeah.
that could be way wrong.
Yeah, and we think though too at the time that the earth was not it's not these huge continents spread out by water. I think there was more of a cohesive landmass before the flood. And after the flood is when you get these disparate areas. So even if they were, in a big area, yes, it takes a big area to spread out 7 billion people or whatever, right? But here's the other thing. I would think that those who are, my view is that Adam was a follower of God after the garden. Enoch is a follower of God. Do you think he might have wanted to hang out with Adam? I think so. Methuselah, his son, he might have. So I'm saying you've got folks that are totally rejecting God, and then you have others that are wanting to follow God. So if you're Lamech and you want to follow God and you have the opportunity to sit and talk with Adam, you're probably going to do that. So it's not just this random person over there, in Ohio somewhere that I've never heard of. It's a descendant. It's a prior, great-great-great-grandfather. He's literally walked and spoken with God. I want to get to know him. I want to find out from him what's going on. So my point is the godly line, I think, is more likely to have had connection with Adam than Cain's descendants, who couldn't give a rip about all that. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I don't think there's a path beating to Adam's door, is my point. There's hardly anybody righteous left on the earth. He may not have had a lot of visitors.
I'm not a very good history student.
Okay.
Where is Babylon in that?
Over here somewhere.
Oh, it's way
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
Okay. Because that's when
Yeah.
it was really spread out, wasn't it? People.
Oh, Babel,
language-
Tower of Babel,
Right,
sorry.
right,
Tower of Babel would be, I don't remember. It's in here somewhere.
Okay, so it's after the flood.
It's after the
Oh,
flood, yep. So everybody up to this point has one language. They start at the flood, they start having kids again, and then it's the descendants of Ham, I think. We'll look at it. I think it's Ham's descendants are the ones who then, they're rejecting God. And they're like, we're going to build a tower so that we don't spread out over the face of the earth the way God has told us to. That's the Tower of Babel. And God says, no, you are. So then he divides the languages. And that's how, again, you have this, we'll deal with it then. It's just an interesting thing how he divides these people out and concentrates the genetic traits of that group. And so that's how you start getting dark-skinned, light-skinned, dominantly, red hair, things like that, because instead of all being together, he divides them up into groups, and whatever group you're in, the dominant traits become dominant. You're isolated from the other groups. So that's where what we think of as races starts to happen, is after the Tower of Babel. There's one race with varying amounts of pigment. You know what I mean? But that happens after the flood at the Tower of Babel. Okay, let me show you one other thing here. The flood, 1656. Methuselah dies 1656. So the oldest man recorded dies at the flood. Now, let me show you this. I have an error on here. I caught it earlier, sitting over here. I thought, let me show you this. It's not late 2900.
Yeah.
It's mid, M-I-D?
Just
M-I-D, sorry. Well, I'll just do it that way. 22-ish hundred. What I did, I took Adam's death and brought the line down instead of the flood. I followed the wrong line down. You'll see what I mean. Let me show you this. I was following this line and I went here about 2900. I meant to follow that line down and it's in the middle, 2200s. BC. is what that is. That's a reference to that, okay? So now let me do this. So the year from creation, 1656, which is about the middle of the 2200s BC. There at the very bottom of that chart, you'll notice the numbers are going in opposite directions. One is getting higher and higher, and the other one is going lower and lower.
I'm not following where mid-2200s comes in.
And the
So
numbers.
BC goes, remember you start at 0 at the Jesus's birth and you go backwards. So the bigger the number, the older it is. So like here is 1700, then 18, 19, 20, 21, 2200 years before the birth of Christ. So I'm taking that and going that way, and then from creation over here at year 0, and you go this way, and you end up at 1656. So I've got it listed on your sheet there both directions
Right there.
to kind of give you a point of reference. We don't think of anything from creation at this point. So every date you've ever heard has nothing to do with creation, unless you look at Jewish dating. It's like 58, it's whatever. They've got some actual date where they go all the way back to creation.
On your chart though, the 2200 is right.
Yes, this is right on here. Where I'm wrong is on this slide. That one slide, I've got an answer, and just mark out 29 and put mid
Back
2200s.
to your chart slide again. On Emmerich up there, right below Masuba, that should stop right before, because he's 5 years before. the
Right,
flood.
here's the problem. These blocks, I made this on an Excel spreadsheet. The blocks are 10 years.
You did this?
Yeah.
Is this yours?
Yeah, I know. I need to get a life, right? Yeah, so each one of these is a little tiny block. There's like 3,000 blocks or whatever, I don't know. But each of them represent a 10-year or a 5-year, I can't remember what I did now. And then I would just color code over until I hit the right number of years. And that's why they hit the same right there, is because there's no way to zoom in anymore. So, yeah. There's a little tiny white line right there. So, yeah, 5 years earlier. So what is the significance, though, of that? Methuselah at 969 years old. That's the longest recorded life. What's the significance? His name means his death shall bring. Now, is that what his name means? If you look up in commentaries and things, they will talk about a dart. And there's association of his name with a dart or a projectile or something coming out of. And so there's this kind of vague, what is that referencing? Well, his death shall bring this, a release of something, a judgment is the way that this has been interpreted. So that's what I mean when I say it means comfort, or it means a replacement, these different things. We're using a little bit of poetic license here to say his death shall bring. We say that because his death brought the flood. What his name means is something's coming out of him. And so we're implying into that. When he's done, here comes something. We don't know what it is.
So you don't think he died in the flood? You
I don't think he died in the flood. I think he died at the flood. So what's the significance of that? His name means his death shall bring, and the flood happens in the year of his death, showing the patience of God. God holds off the flood until he's dead, and he lives longer than anybody else. Is the longest recorded life. I think that's an illustration of God's long-suffering patience.
Because he wouldn't have died in the judgment.
Right. He would have, So now whether he died in the flood, the day before the flood, as the flood is coming, we don't know. We're not told that. But it is at least the same year. We do know that.
I want to know who came up with the meanings of these names.
When I first looked into that, there was a gentleman I was listening to at the time. I'm trying to remember his name off the top of my head. Anyway, there's Hebrew. When they find the oldest Hebrew, it has different symbols for letters, and then there's a modern Hebrew that you and I would know. Well, you have, like in Egyptian hieroglyphics, let me put it this way. Let me back up and start over. You can write language two ways. One is symbols that represent things, or you can make letters which you string together and make words, right? We have that. We have phonetic language, written language. Some languages are written with signs or symbols. Well, the ancient Hebrew language was kind of both. It had like a house. It was like a symbol that sort of looked like a house, but then over time they would string these things together. And so my understanding was when you took these names in their original Hebrew, the way you would write them, that's where part of this meaning comes from. So, and that's why the meaning can be a little bit vague or hard to kind of nail down. And that's why you're looking for clues like, they named him Seth because he was appointed. Okay, well then his name means to be is appointed, that kind of thing. Or Noah, we're naming him Noah because out of him will come comfort or relief. Okay, well Noah means relief or comfort. We're associating that at times with what we see in the text, and then you see the way the original language was written, and then from that they do this. So why am I caveating all that? Because I want to show you something, and I don't want it to be taken too far, but I think it's interesting, and I'll show you that as we wrap up. So what can we learn from this genealogy? That's where we started. So let me talk about a few of those things. This is in 1 Chronicles, and it lists the descendants, and it goes out past Noah. It's Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, and it starts listing off the different sons and then their descendants. So the point is, this exactly matches Genesis 5. Adam, Seth, Enosh. I mean, that's a match. Then you come to Luke and you do the genealogy. The son of Shem, the son of Noah, the son of Lamech, the son of Methuselah, the son of Enoch, the son of Jared. It goes backwards, exactly the same. So these are not like, some will say, well, this, let me come back over here and show you one of these real quick. All right. Some will say, well, but we know the earth is millions or billions of years old. So when we see this, it can't really mean that. So it's probably symbolic. It probably is like Kenan may have been an ancestor of Methuselah or Mahalalel, but it wasn't a direct descendant, because the word might mean not just his father, maybe it's his great grandfather. And they try to twist that way. And these aren't, it's like, why in the world would we think that? It's very specific. They lived this number. It's not like he lived 900 years and had kids, or he lived 800 years. No, it's 817 or something. It's very specific on the times, and then he lived 162 years after that, and you know what I mean? So it's very specific. And then the order, they're not skipping over people, because when you get to these other things, it's the exact same order that you see everywhere throughout the scripture. So there's no reason to think these aren't the actual descendants in the order in which they laid out. Genesis 4, Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. I showed you that the week before. This gets into that, the meaning of the name. So Seth has a Hebrew a lexicon number assigned. It's H7 or 8352, the one here at the top. That's the Hebrew number assigned. This is what it looks like if you were to write it out in modern Hebrew. And when they say it's here from, it's got a derivative that it's starting from. The derivative is this here. Now you see the similarity in these two? They're very similar. Okay? It's slightly different. So what does that word mean? It's a different word. It means look at this here. Very similar in the way it's pronounced and stuff. It's a primitive root to place in a wide variety of applications. Apply, appoint, array, bring, consider, lay. It's used a lot of different ways, but appoint is one of the ways that it's used. Up here, it's substituted. So when you read that verse, you come back to here, she called his name Seth, for God had appointed for me an offspring instead of Abel. So you kind of see how that makes sense, how the meaning of that word is used when you see the history of the word and how it came about. And so that's how we're getting some of these meanings. Now, I showed you last time Adam, Cain, Enoch, different Enoch, by the way. I read Methuselah, I think, is that, yeah, and then Lamech. It's a different word. It's not Methuselah. I can't remember how you pronounce that one. And then Lamech. Different, this guy here and this guy here are not the two we've read about this morning. Just common names. There's two Bills, one on each family line or whatever, two Smiths. Okay, so when we did that, now let's look at Adam through Seth, the other line. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. Now, if you pull their meaning out, Adam means man, Seth means appointed. Enosh is another word they used for man or mortal, not a god, but a person. Kenan means sorrow. Mahalalel, the blessed God. Jared means shall come down. Enoch, teaching. Methuselah, his death shall bring. Lamech, despairing. Noah, comfort, rest. So if you just read the meanings of the names, man appointed moral sorrow. The blessed God shall come down, teaching that his death shall bring the despairing comfort and rest. Is that a bit of a stretch? Maybe a little, because some of the meanings, some of the meanings are, right? So I don't want to go too far, but here's the point. The names are what they are. The meanings are pretty close regardless. I mean, maybe you're using synonyms, but it's pretty close. This is saying that man is appointed moral sorrow, and that's true. But the blessed God, Jesus, will come down and he will teach us that his death brings the despairing us comfort and rest.
So those names are inspired.
Yeah, I would say. Here's the other thing. Who wrote the Old Testament? Who's kept the Old Testament? Who's the Jews? Who rejects Jesus? The Jews. Do you think they conspired to hide the Christian gospel in a genealogy in chapter 5 of Genesis? Probably not, right? I think this is like one of those fingerprints of God on the text. No one else could do that, because they certainly didn't try to do it. The rabbinic scholars weren't trying to figure out a way to make it look like Christianity was true in Genesis. Do you see what I'm
They
saying?
don't believe the first 5 books of the Bible, right?
No, they believe the whole Old Testament, but and this would be in the first five books anyway. But my point is, to me, this is one of those things where when we say God's word is inspired, and one of my I'll get to it in a moment, but I talk about at the end. Everything in the Bible has meaning, and that's why I say I'd love to figure out what Lamech lived 777 years means. It means something. I just don't know what it is yet. I'm excited for the day when I'll figure that one out. Because Seth means something, Mahalalel means something. I mean, these all mean something, and they're there for a reason, and it's up to us to dig and figure out what those meanings are. So don't see genealogies as, oh, let's skip that and get to the good stuff. There's some really good stuff buried in genealogies. All right, we got to wrap up. Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Lamech lived. I'm not sure why I put that back in there. All right, what can we learn from this genealogy? People matter, number one. These are not random people. These are actual people that have names. And history is a story of individual lives. I probably misspelled individual or something. That doesn't look right, but it probably is. I don't know. Anyway, the Bible is precise in its telling of history. It doesn't tell us everything in history, but what it does tell us, it's accurate. Everything in the Bible is there for a reason. It's our job to discover that reason. And lastly, even in a wicked and corrupt generation, God always has a remnant.
Get back to those names.
Yeah.
They all had the sin nature. They were all
Yeah.
born sinners.
Yep,
But God used them. and
Yeah.
Brought that all out.
yep, yep. So, pretty remarkable. So we'll not be here next week. The following, we're going to get into a passage of the scripture that nobody wants to talk about. Genesis chapter 6.
Yeah.
And the whole Nephilim and what is that, and giants and all the weird
I
stuff.
want to talk
I do
about
too.
it. Man, I'm
It,
there.
I know. People like you and I want to talk about it. Nobody behind a pulpit wants to talk about it. Because you get run out of town.
About Mount St. Helens yet.
And no, not yet. I'm getting there. So anyway, let's pray because we got to get you out of here. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. Most of all, we're grateful that you have given us all this truth and all these golden nuggets. And Lord, you have told us that if we seek you with a pure heart, we will see you. You will be found by those who look for you. Lord, help us to, on a regular basis, dig in your word to find not facts, but to find you. Learn more about you, grow deeper in our relationship with you. Help that growth in relationship to lead to a new level of boldness where we would be willing to talk with those who have not yet met you and show them the truth. But also help us, Lord, understand that it's totally in your hands. There's nothing we can do to open the eyes of someone's heart. We're totally dependent on you for that. Lord, be with us this week. Bring us back together safely here in a few weeks so we would learn more about you. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.